Raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence I give upon this hearing by the Senate of Texas of impeachment charges against Warren Kenneth Paxton Jr. shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. Please be seated. Speak close to the mic and speak up. Mr. Hardin, you're on the clock.
Thank you. State your full name, please.
James Blake Brickman, but I go by Blake.
How are you presently employed?
I work here in Austin at a venture capital firm.
I'm going to move pretty fast with you here, but I don't want you...
You need to move closer to the mic.
Yeah,
Mr.
you need to come through. I'm going to move pretty fast here with you, but I don't want you to speak fast. I'm just explaining to you, they'll come kind of hot and heavy, okay? Would you give me an idea of where you grew up, your college, and your jobs before you got to the AG's office?
I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I went to Vanderbilt University, and I went to the University of Kentucky College of Law.
And when you finished, during the time that you were going to school, did you go to law school at night school?
Yes, sir. I was the chief of staff for United States Senator Jim Bunning in Washington, D.C., and I went to night law school during that time.
And then did you work for another politician before you came back to Texas?
Yes, I was Governor Matt Bevin from Kentucky's chief of staff from 2015 to 2019.
My memory is that Governor Bevin was considered a pretty conservative governor, was he not?
He was probably the most conservative governor in the country.
Is that the history of your public employment?
It is.
All right.
Senator Jim Bunning was also known as the most conservative senator at the time. Rand Paul took his seat when he retired.
All right. Now, when you came back to Dallas, what year did you come back, and how did you end up at the AG's office?
I came back in the end of 2019. I interviewed for a position as Deputy Attorney General with Jeff Mateer and Attorney General Ken Paxton in December of 2019 when they personally recruited me to come back to Texas.
And did General Paxton himself interview you and ask you to come back and come?
He did. I met with General Paxton in early 2019 in Austin. And then after Christmas in 2019, he offered me the job when we had lunch at Campese's in Dallas together.
I have Attorney General Exhibit 170.
Can I move this closer?
Sure. I think it should be either right after or right before that, Stacy. I didn't have the page number. Thank you. Would you read that, please, out loud?
This is a message from General Ken Paxton to me. And
Dated what date?
January 11th, 2020.
Is this right before you started, or had you actually started?
This was 2 weeks before I started, so.
Go ahead.
I got a text from both Tommy and Doug Deason, both singing your praises. I think highly of both those guys, so you keep good company. I'm looking forward to your coming to work with us. You're going to fit in great and be a tremendous asset to our team.
And that is that, with that kind of endorsement, is that the way you began working for for Attorney General Paxton?
It is. Tommy Hicks is who he's referring to, who at the time was the co-chairman of the RNC and a very close friend of Donald Trump Jr. Doug Deason is a conservative philanthropist in Dallas who is well known in the Republican Party.
All right. Now, when you began, what was your position?
I was in charge of policy and strategic initiatives, but because I had not waived into the Texas bar, my title initially was not Deputy Attorney General because I did not waive in until about June of 2020.
All right. When was the first time that you heard the name Nate Paul?
Sometime in either late March of 2020 or early April 2020.
And without going into what was said, did you have a conversation with the young man that was called the Body Man?
I had a conversation with Drew Wicker. Drew Wicker came to me.
And where was Drew Wicker's position in relation to you?
Drew Wicker reported directly to me.
All right. And was Mr. Wicker concerned?
He was very concerned.
And did he report to you his basis of his concern?
He did.
And what did you tell him?
Objection, hearsay.
That's fine. We'll just move right along. Did you give him some advice? Just yes or no?
Yes.
All right. And later, did he inform you that he had followed through on that advice?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
All right. Did you
Sustained.
become aware ultimately of who it was that he was concerned about?
Attorney General Paxton was meeting privately with a man named Nate Paul without his security detail present and without the meetings being on his personal calendar, on his official calendar.
And was Drew concerned about him periodically getting rid of his security detail?
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I object. We heard from Drew Wicker. This is hearsay.
Sustained.
My only question was, did he relay his concerns about that matter without telling me what they were?
Yes.
All right. Now, I want to move now to September of 2020. Over a period of time, without going into detail, had you become familiar with and heard the Nate Paul in connection with other matters on several different or multiple occasions?
Yes, sir.
Objection, leading, and hearsay.
That's not leading. I've just asked whether he did. He could have said no, or he could have said yes.
Overruled.
Thank you. Now, by the time we hit September the 29th, what was your state of mind as to what your concerns were about Mr. Paul?
I was extremely concerned about Mr. Paxton's conduct. My office was about 5 feet away from Attorney General Ken Paxton's office. And what I saw over the course of those 3, 4, 5 months, the summer of 2020, I was very concerned that Mr. Paxton was breaking the law.
I want to go, if I may step away to get an exhibit, but first I want to ask you about your relationship up until the summer when you started having concerns with the Attorney General. Was there a particular occasion back in the spring in which the Attorney General sought to praise you?
Yes, sir. Attorney General Paxton and I had a very good relationship for the first few months I was in the office.
All right. Well, may I step over here, Your Honor? May I approach a bit, witness, Your Honor? Now, would you identify the exhibit I just showed you, which is obviously a book, and what exhibit number, just for identification purposes, is it?
It's Exhibit 705.
And what is the title of the book?
The book is called Scalia Speaks, about Antonin Scalia, Justice Scalia.
And where did you get that book?
Attorney General Ken Paxton gave this book to me in front of 40 or 50 of the most senior employees in the Office of Attorney General in May of 2020.
When did he give, oh, in May, that's what I was going to ask you. Did he inscribe it?
He did.
Is the inscription in the first page?
It is.
What did he say?
Would you like me to read it?
Yes.
Blake, I am so grateful you joined our team at the Texas AG's office. You have been an amazing addition. I'm confident that you will continue to make a difference for our office and all of Texans. Blessings, Ken Paxton.
Thank you. How would you characterize whether that is an accurate description of the way he talks to and about you up through the month of May of 2020?
It was accurate.
All right. Was there a particular event that you'd been involved in on behalf of somebody that led him to be giving you that book and an award?
Yes, sir.
What was it?
This was early May of 2020, and if you remember, that was at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic. And there was a situation in the DFW Metroplex, where I'm from, where there was a hairdresser named Shelley Luther who was put in Dallas County Jail because she violated a stay-at-home order so she could provide for her family.
How did that involve you?
I went to Attorney General Ken Paxton and said, "Sir, this is wrong that this is happening in this country."
And what was his reaction?
He said, "Well, what can we do about it?"
And you said?
I said, "You should speak out about this. This is wrong. Use your bully pulpit," and he did.
And as a result, what was his reaction to that?
He did several interviews. He was on Fox News talking about this. Tucker Carlson even praised him in early May of 2020. So he was very happy, and this was my idea.
And of course, there were other public officials that then also spoke up around that same time, correct?
There were many others after the fact, yes.
All right. And so as a result, what was the Attorney General of you having suggested that to him and it turning out well, how was his attitude toward you as you entered June of 2020?
It was great. That's why he gave me the book. He had never done this before, is what he told the entire staff. He had never made an award like this ever before.
All right, now let's go to September the 29th, September 30th of 2020. You said you had become concerned. You expressed some of those concerns. What was the focus and what was giving rise to it for you personally of September 29th and 30th of 2020?
I witnessed Attorney General Ken Paxton do brazen things on behalf of Nate Paul. He abused the entire office of the Attorney General of Texas to benefit Nate Paul. And it got worse and worse and worse as the year progressed.
Were you one of those who went to the FBI on September the 30th?
Yes, sir.
And are you also one of those that has been colloquially called a whistleblower?
Yes, sir.
Well, when you went to the FBI, did you go with other persons?
There were 7 of the most senior staffers at the Office of Attorney General. We went together.
Now, there seems to be some confusion in some parts of the world as to what evidence is. Did y'all take evidence with you?
We did.
And what did you take in the form of evidence to talk to the FBI?
Again, this was the 7 most senior people in the agency. We took firsthand personal knowledge of Ken Paxton's illegal, immoral, and unethical conduct to federal law enforcement officers.
You took yourselves?
Yes.
And would you describe the meeting as to what y'all did?
Sure. The meeting lasted several hours. I don't remember exactly how much, but we all went around the table and shared our concerns with Ken Paxton's conduct.
Is that evidence?
It is.
Did you give eyewitness accounts of what you observed?
Yes.
Would that be just like an eyewitness account of somebody seeing a robbery?
Yes.
All right. Sometimes the victims of robbery don't have any documents on them, do they?
Correct.
All right. But at the end of that time, had each of the 7 of you provided your evidence of what you believed was inappropriate and wrongful conduct by the Attorney General?
We did.
All right. And at that time, had you seen the grand jury subpoenas that were issued?
I had seen 1 or 2, but not all of them.
All right. And then, after that meeting, were you present when it was decided to send a letter to actually, who did y'all send letters to? Let me put it that way.
We sent a letter to Greg Simpson, who is the head of HR for OAG.
Now, it keeps being this, I thought it was dead, but not, I guess not. It keeps being this suggestion that somebody removed a letterhead from a letter that you sent. Is that true?
I don't even know what that is referring to.
All right. Did you see, was a letter sent without General Paxton's name on it?
I believe the letter we sent had the Attorney General's crest on it.
All right. What was the practice there as far as letters that you had?
I don't recall ever discussing letterhead at all with any of my colleagues when we signed the letter.
All right. Did you have letters with regular letters that were printed and available with the seal but not his name on it?
Objection leading.
Did you?
Yes.
Your Honor, can we get a,
Yeah, that was sustained.
thank you.
Rephrase.
Thank you. Tell me what kind of letterheads you had there.
I mean, there were many different types of letterhead. I don't even recall letterhead being a topic of discussion at all amongst our colleagues.
Well, did any of y'all do you have any knowledge or evidence or any belief regarding whether somebody messed with the letterhead of a letter?
None at all.
All right. If somebody's tried to keep saying it and saying it and saying it, would that be true or untrue?
Not true.
Now, after the 30th, and then on the 1st, did each of you attempt to visit with the Attorney General?
We did.
And what was his response?
That he was out of the office and would not meet with us, but that we could email him our concerns. He said that back to us in a text message.
All right. So then, after it happened, there was some public releases. Some of Mr. Mateer resigned and so, correct?
Jeff Mateer resigned on, I believe it was Friday, October 2nd.
All right. Now, what happened?
2020.
What happened with you after these events? Did you resign?
I did not.
And what happened? What was your circumstances going forward?
I showed up for work.
And when you went to work, what were the circumstances?
Monday, October 5th, was the very first time I ever met a man named Brent Webster, who Attorney General Ken Paxton had hired to be the first assistant. We had a meeting previously scheduled at 9 a.m. that morning about the legislative affairs team, of which I was involved with. The very first thing that Brent Webster did in that meeting to me was he threw me out of the meeting.
All right. And then what happened next?
I went back to my office, and Brent Webster came into my office with a woman who was armed and kept threatening me to meet with him.
What did you say?
I said,
Objection, hearsay.
All right, fair enough.
Sustained.
Fair enough. So did you have a conversation with him?
I did.
And did you have a meeting with him?
I told Brent Webster that
Objection, hearsay.
That's fine if he doesn't want to know. That's fine.
Sustained.
Let me go after that conversation. How much longer did you stay employed with the Attorney General's office?
I was terminated October 20th, 2020, so that would be 15 days.
Briefly, can you describe the circumstances of the environment for you there before they ultimately terminated you?
It was an extremely hostile work environment. They had, like I mentioned earlier, Brent showed up in my office with a woman with a gun. They asked me to take my cell phone to the car. They removed me from access to Attorney General Paxton's schedule, which I oversaw. They hired apparently another scheduler without asking me. They sent a letter to the entire House of Representatives in response to a request by Jeff Leach that they did not even show me before they sent out, even though I oversaw the legislative team. I could go on.
All right. Let me ask you this. Can I have 576 and 3350? I believe they're in evidence, but I want to check before you put them up.
We don't have 576 on our
All right.
paper.
I think she's getting copies.
And what was the other number?
The two numbers were 576 and 3350. And I'll represent they are the letter that Mr. Leach sent, and the second exhibit is the response from General Paxton.
Let me give them a short moment to look at them. Any objection?
Just take a look, Your Honor, just a second,
Sure,
please.
take your time.
Care about these. I guess no objection, Your Honor.
Admit Exhibit 350 and 576 into evidence.
All right, can we have 576, please?
Hold on, Mr. Harden, you offered 3350. Did you mean 350? Because what we received was 350.
Well, it was 350, I think. Well, let me look and see. Can I look?
Make sure. Sure. Go ahead.
Hard copy.
So it is 350, I overheard. So admit 350 and 576 into evidence. You may
Thank you,
continue.
Adam. Now, can you we won't go through the whole letter, but if we can, scroll up, please. If you look at it, excuse me, this is a letter October the 9th, is it not? You were still employed? Were you still employed or not?
Yes, sir, I was still employed.
All right. And Mr. Leach, at that time, did you know what his position was in the House?
Mr. Leach was the chairman of a committee that had direct oversight over the Office of Attorney General.
Got you. And in that capacity, if we scroll up, please, actually go to the next page, I believe it is. Thank you. If you could do the top of it, again at October the 9th. Can we go up? We should scroll up just a little bit. This last paragraph. I'll publish it with you to make sure I do it correctly. Irrespective of that decision, by way of this letter, I formally request that you provide a written report as to what specific steps are being taken by you and your newly appointed First Assistant Attorney General, Brent Webster, to ensure that the effective operations of the agency continue in full force and effect, without delay, without interference, and without interruption. I would ask that such a report be provided to all members of the legislature within 7 days. Now, in the paragraphs before, what did Mr. Leach lay out for him before he came to that final? If you could just describe it.
Mr. Leach appeared to be concerned about the state of the Office of Attorney General in light of the fact that our allegations had been public at this time.
All right. And so was this an opportunity to ask the Attorney General to respond to those allegations that had become public? Is that right?
That's right.
All right. Thank you. And now, Stacy, if I can have 350, please. Oh, that's 350. Let me have 576. Pardon me? All right. Now, if you would, look at this letter. You recall this letter?
I do.
And in this answer that he gives, how many pages? Scroll through it, please. Does he respond in any way specifically with Chairman Leach's request for an explanation and ideas as to what's going forward to correct it?
No, but he does lie to Representative Leach and the other members of the House.
Can you point out where it's untrue in what he said?
Very first line. The very first line, he says that we made false claims. We did not make false claims.
All right. Anywhere else? Do you take issue with anything else?
On the second page, the second to last paragraph, Attorney General Ken Paxton says, OAG's regular business is moving forward at full capacity. That is 100% false.
All right. You're talking about the condition of the office after y'all left.
That's correct.
All right. I want to move on, but my one question to you is, anywhere in this letter that you read, does he really address Chairman Leach's questions?
He does not.
Okay. Now, what was the occasion? Exactly how were you terminated? What were the circumstances?
Brent Webster, who was the first assistant at the time, called me into his office. There was another woman there named, I believe her name was Shelley Gustafson, and he asked me if I would like to have severance or if I wanted to be terminated. And I told him, Brent, I've done nothing wrong. I'm not going to resign to take severance. So he terminated me.
All right. Now, at some time after that, did you and 3 others of the senior staff file a lawsuit?
We did.
And is that lawsuit still pending?
It is.
Was there any attempt to settle that lawsuit? And if so, when?
There was no attempt to settle the lawsuit prior to Ken Paxton's reelection in 2022.
I want to ask you that. What date, approximately, or what month did y'all file your lawsuit?
It was sometime in mid-November of 2020, if I recall correctly. November of 2020.
All right. When you filed that lawsuit in November 20, you were about a year away from the election, were you not?
2 years.
2 years away from the election, excuse me. And during that period of time, what happened with the lawsuit?
Attorney General Ken Paxton tied up our case for 2 years, making the absurd legal argument that the whistleblower law does not apply to him. He filed what's called a plea to the jurisdiction, which effectively stopped discovery in our case for over 2 years.
So, as of the election of November 22nd, had there been any discovery or ability to legally lay out the evidence or allegations in your lawsuit?
No.
Now, once the election in November of 2020 was over, or 22, excuse me, how was it that settlement conversation started? How did that get started?
Sometime in late January of 2023, so earlier this year, Ken Paxton's lawyers called our lawyers and said that they would like to discuss settlement and mediation. So the idea of settlement...
Stop. This is great. He's about to jump up. I want him to save his energy.
Thank you.
So he, at the time that they initiated settlement discussions, had there ever been any settlement discussions prior to that?
No.
Had there ever been any indication while the lawsuit was pending and the election was in the future, during that 2 years, was there ever any indication or suggestion that about a possible settlement?
Never.
Right. Do you know of any circumstances that changed and led to their reaching out to you to discuss a settlement?
Ken Paxton was reelected.
Was he reelected without knowing anything, without the public being told any of the real facts, and so in the discovery with depositions or so?
I would say it's even worse than that. I think Ken Paxton lied to the public for 2 years about our case. So not only did we not have discovery, he did the opposite and lied to the public about our allegations.
Let me ask you, if you can, then what I want to do is to go to Exhibit 460. I want to move to introduce 469 and 470, but I first want to ask a couple of questions about it. With the original settlement that everybody's heard a good deal about, was there a proposal that you actually personally, individually held up from reaching a settlement?
I did not go to the mediation. I
All right,
never
just hold
appeared.
on. We're going to try to do this in a question-answer way. So, was there a suggestion of a mediation sometime in February?
Yes.
All right. And who all went to that mediation?
My other 3 co-plaintiffs went: Mark Penley, David Maxwell, and Ryan Vassar.
And out of that mediation, did the 3 of them reach a settlement?
They did.
And what was this amount that they settled for?
$3.3 million.
Why did you not go to the mediation?
Because I did not want to settle the case.
Why did you not want to settle the case?
Because I wanted to be vindicated for what happened to me and my colleagues, and I did not want to settle the case. What happened to us should never, ever happen to any other public servant in
Objection,
Texas.
non-responsive at this point.
All right, let me
Sustained.
move on. I'm moving on. Now, when you did you have conditions for money? Is there, how much money you wanted or anything?
No, sir.
Did you even give them a figure?
I never gave him a figure.
What happened after the mediation when 3 had settled and the Attorney General had settled? Did you see pressure or response or any attempts to pay you more money to get you to settle?
Yes, what happened is the parties came to me and said, okay, Mr. Brickman, what would it take?
Your Honor, I'm sorry to object. These are Rule
All right. That's all right.
408 settlement discussions, number 1 and number 2.
Sustained.
Your Honor, I
Hearsay.
move to introduce Exhibits 469 and 470.
Was there any objection? I don't believe there was. Or
I
have
need
we-
to see those.
or we need to see those?
If these are Rule 408 settlement discussions, that would be my objection.
Do you have those exhibits in front of you?
I do.
For the record in the court, they're not in evidence yet.
I have 470 and 469.
Yes, sir. I move to introduce.
Same objection. Not only are there hearsay, but it's protected communications under Rule 408 settlement discussions.
Your Honor, there's nothing protected by these. These documents have already been public in numerous ways.
That's, the trial is here in the court, not in the public. And in this court, Your Honor, these are inadmissible.
That's fine. The objection is invalid, Your Honor. These are documents that have now
Give
been
me a
published.
moment.
Sure.
Give me a moment.
I know.
We looked at 408. We sustained the objection.
Pardon me, Your Honor?
I said, we looked at 408. We sustained the objection. I believe that was your objection.
That was my objection.
Rule 408.
Yes, sir. These were not, though, for the liability of the claim. I believe that's what we're speaking about as far as 408. These statements show what he himself, they offered him If you look at
Your
the
Honor, I'm object just to relating what the documents say and renew the objection that's already been ruled upon.
I sustained it. Move forward.
Well, did you have conditions for not agreeing?
Objection, same objection.
He has a right to tell what his objections were to settling.
Hold on. Just witness.
Here's my problem.
You're talking over each other. I can't hear, and that means they can't hear. So what was your response to his objection?
I asked him for what was his response to their offer. This is an outward offer. This is not a mediation offer. None of this has to do with mediation now. They settled in mediation, and now the lawsuit's still pending. He rejected it. They came to him with the proposal.
Your Honor, again, he's
Excuse me,
relating
hold
what
on,
he...
let me finish.
Hold on, Mr. Busby, hold on.
This is the problem with the eating up the time, Your Honor. This is a really spurious objection.
I'll give him 2 minutes back here, okay? So your objection is, Mr. Busby,
Rule 408, textbook, this is improper, not admissible.
We just used up a minute and a half on an objection that has no validity.
you need to restate your question.
Sure. What were you making demands on them for whether you would ever agree to consider settlement?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Don't tell me what to do. No.
Overruled.
All right. Now, the answer first would be yes or no, and then, depending on that answer, I'll ask you the next question.
Could you please ask the question again?
Sure. Did you make demands on them that would have to be fulfilled before you would ever settle?
I did.
Same objection, Your Honor. That's Rule 408.
Your Honor, this is what he said, what his conditions were. I can even ask it, what were your conditions that you demanded before you ever settled?
Your Honor, Rule
Mr.
408,
Busby, Mr. Busby, we agreed with you on the
Thank you.
first two objections on 408, not on this one. Overruled. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Is the question, what were my conditions to settle?
Yes. What were your conditions before you would agree to settle?
I told Ken
Objection,
Paxton
hearsay,
and the
ma'am.
Office of Attorney General that I would settle
That
for
one is
three
Hold on.
things.
Hold on.
Everybody. Let him speak, please. He's in
Sustained
charge.
on that one. Go ahead, rephrase. I sustained that objection, rephrase
All right.
it.
I wanted to know what your conditions were, not what you told them. Okay? Hold on. That's the basis of the objection. What were your conditions before you would ever agree to consider settling?
I had three.
What were they?
Ken Paxton apologize for calling us rogue employees and admit that we did what we thought was right, was the first one.
That's number one.
The second one was the Third Court of Appeals had ruled in our favor that the whistleblower law applies, and I wanted him to agree not to move to dismiss that.
In other words, you had a winning opinion on intermediate court level, and you wanted an agreement that they wouldn't challenge that agreement, that ruling?
I did because I wanted future Texas public servants to know that the whistleblower law applies in this state.
All right. And what was your third demand?
That Attorney General Ken Paxton remove a disparaging statement where he called us rogue employees that was on the OAG website.
In response to that, instead of those conditions, where you offered more money if you wanted that instead.
Objection, Rule 408, Your Honor.
I'll sustain that objection.
Were you offered more money?
Objection, Your Honor.
Well, I was offered.
Wait a minute. He's got an objection on the table. Hold
Objection. Sustained.
on. Well, did ultimately, were you willing to consider yourself, your own state of mind? Were you willing to consider more money instead of those three objections? Those three objectives that you had?
I was not.
All right. And was that communicated to the other side?
It was.
Now, ultimately, does Exhibit 470 set out this ultimate settlement that was pending, that is being considered by the House? Is that actually a document that has been presented to the House of Representatives?
It is.
So is it the settlement that is actually under consideration that the House, instead of paying right away, launched an investigation of?
It is.
So is that a public document?
It is.
Again, Your Honor, in all due respect, reoffer Exhibit 470, please.
Objection to 470?
Yes, Your Honor. It's as you can see, it's a mediated agreement proposed, which falls under a privilege, as the court knows. Moreover, it's hearsay.
Your Honor, excuse me, go ahead, I'm sorry. What I was going to say is that is tacked on to the settlement that occurred with the others. It was not produced by mediation. He never attended a mediation. He never engaged in a mediation process. What they did was they just simply put the final agreement on there once he agreed not to object, and they add on those 3 conditions that he required in order to represent the whole final settlement that affected everyone.
Okay, hold on.
Settlement is the problem.
Mr. Hardin, is this a public document?
Yes. I say that. Make sure I'm not overstating that.
Yeah, make sure
Yes,
you're not overstating
I'm getting, yes, it's being pulled off the internet, is it not? It's on the internet. And I would point out too, I think 482B points out that the court can admit one either way on your own if you think it affects some type of issue in the case. I can assure you that Mr. Busby will be talking about having sued and being settled on cross. That would be something that would come under that. Thank you, Dick.
Overrule the objection.
All right. Now, may I have
The exhibits 470 and
Thank you, Your Honor.
469 are in admitted evidence.
All right. Now, just to be sure the record's clear, you never participated in a mediated settlement, did you?
I did not.
All right. Now, I want you, if we scroll down and look at the bottom of this, scroll it to it. Number 2 says what?
OAG will permanently remove this press release from its website.
And that press release was what? Is that the one in which you, what was that press release?
This was the press release where Attorney General Ken Paxton called me and my colleagues rogue employees.
Number 3?
Would you
Go
like me
ahead.
to read it?
Read it.
A recital in the settlement agreement will state, whereas Attorney General Ken Paxton accepts that plaintiffs acted in a matter that they thought was right and apologizes for referring to them as, quote, rogue employees, end quote.
And then number 4, would you read that?
The parties will not ask that the Third Court of Appeals opinion issued October 21, 2021 be withdrawn.
And is that the settlement that is now still pending before the House for approval?
It is.
You can take that down. Now, I want to, if
Mr. Hardin, about how long do you expect to go? Mr.
I'm
Hardin,
sorry?
about how much longer do you expect to go? They've been on it, jurors have been sitting for 2 hours.
I'm hoping to do about another 14 or 15 minutes.
We take a
Members,
break.
I think you can make it for another 14 minutes. Okay, I see nods from the jurors. Continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I can now, I want to move, there was an Attorney General report issued, was it not? That sometime in 21, setting out the Attorney General's side of what happened here?
In August of 2021, the Attorney General put out a report.
I believe Attorney General 127 is in evidence. I'm sure it is, but I just want to be certain.
It
Yes,
is. I put it in evidence.
All right. Now, would you identify the front page? If you read this report, can you just describe it for you in gentle descriptive language, please? Would you?
This is the report that the Office of Attorney General put out, clearing itself of wrongdoing.
All right. was represented as some type of independent report, right?
Yes.
And then you discovered, based on public statements, it was actually prepared by Mr. Webster, the first assistant.
That's correct.
Okay. In this report, have I asked you just to take three or four examples of things that you disagree with? Have I asked you to do that?
Yes.
All right. What I wanted to ask you is, in this report, how would you describe your reaction to it as accuracy in terms of what happened in these matters involving Nate Paul?
I would call this report a whitewash full of lies
All right.
and omissions.
Now, if I may, let's just go over to page 5 and do this real quickly. If I ask you to pick 4 or 5 samples, can you just do that for me? And would you look on page 5 and see as to the first claim? What is untrue about that claim? You
It
see where you
says,
are?
on 2 prior occasions involving Nate Paul's interests, the Open Records Division sided with the government agency against disclosing to Nate Paul. That is not true. There was an Open Records decision that took no opinion as to the release of the documents.
What about the second claim?
If you start with the sentence, most relevant here.
Your Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt this witness. This witness was not involved in the Open Records decision. He was not involved in the MIDI intervention, at least certainly not directly involved. And for him to go through and, without taking away counsel's time, and go line by line a report about things that he wasn't involved in, that would not be proper. So maybe with respect to the second claim, maybe he has some personal knowledge, but everything else, he has none.
That may be one of the more imaginative objections I've heard throughout this entire trial. What I would point out, excuse me, what I would point out is, if I want to go through, he did have contact with the MIDI. Well, I just went by it because they've heard a million things about the MIDI case. But all he's being asked is, are they true or untrue? He's got that wonderful art of screaming cross-examination. He can use every bit of it he wants, okay? But this issue here is simply, does he believe that is an untrue statement? He can challenge him as to what his basis is on cross.
Overruled.
Thank you. On this number 2 here, where it says A.G. Paxton's involvement is consistent with his predecessors and in line with his required duties and legal obligations as Attorney General of Texas. Most relevant here, the position taken by the AG in this litigation was adverse to Nate Paul and in support of a higher settlement amount to be paid by Nate Paul to the MIDI Foundation, as opposed to the prospect of continued and costly litigation that would disproportionately benefit the charity's court-appointed receiver and his lawyer. Is that a truthful statement?
It is not a truthful statement.
And you actually had an occasion to be asked, the Attorney General, to review the MIDI file at one time. All right. The third claim. This informal guidance letter regarding foreclosure sales written by Bangert was made in response to requests for disaster counsel advice from Texas Senator Brian Hughes during the height of the pandemic and not for the benefit of Nate Paul. Is that a true or untrue statement?
Objection, personal knowledge, Your Honor.
Object. Overruled. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Is that a true or untrue statement?
It is an untrue statement. The foreclosure opinion was for Nate Paul's benefit.
And in fact, the foreclosure opinion that said that foreclosures could not be conducted at that time because of the limit on people in the COVID situation, was that actually even totally inconsistent with what the Attorney General had just done recently?
It was this opinion was entirely inconsistent from prior opinions that our office put out. This was a time, sorry.
Are you familiar with a particular event some weeks right before the opinion of August 1st or 2nd concerning foreclosures?
1 month before this opinion came out, Attorney General Ken Paxton held a fundraiser in Dallas outdoors, and a month later issued an opinion saying that foreclosure sales could not continue outdoors.
Can we go to page 6, please? Look at the top. Kamak legally and properly exercised authority delegated to him by both AG Paxton and the TCDAO. Kamak was designated as outside counsel for OAG by AG Paxton, and he was also knowingly appointed as a special prosecutor by the Travis County DA's office. Is that a true or untrue statement?
It is false.
All right. Would you tell the jury whether these that you've labeled untrue statements that we've just gone through for just a couple of minutes, whether they are typical of this report or unique to this report?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Are there other misstatements in this report?
There are many other misstatements in the report. These are just a few samples of the misstatements in this report.
All right. Your Honor, I've got to get a couple of things together. Can I renege and we take our break now? I will be through shortly after you return.
Yes. Before we break, could both parties come up for a second?